Okay, so the next thing that we're going to start to learn about is some Camera Raw. What is Camera Raw? Kind of think about it as a replacement to Lightroom in your workflow, as we spoke about before. Great thing about Camera Raw is that's where you can adjust like the brightness, exposure, the different colors and saturations of colors in an image. It's also where you can really start to tweak around, in particular, I guess, with the colors, but then also like the exposure and shadows and highlights of an image. It's where you can really start to make an image, say, look really moody or give it like a kind of flavor or zest that's different to what was shot straight out of the camera. And the secret is that you will never put an image somewhere online or wherever without it going through at least Camera Raw or Photoshop first. But I guess before we kick it off, 2 quick rules for Camera Raw is always make sure you convert for Smart Filter. If you don't know what that means yet, don't worry, but just remember, convert for Smart Filter. And the other one is edit with the end in mind. What does that mean? That means that, for example, with an image like this, look, we know that we want it, say, to mute those blues because the blues of the sky are too bright and they really kind of, say, detract from the building. For this in particular, this is for one of our clients, HERC. They're glass reinforced concrete manufacturers. They specialise in facades on buildings and kind of anything that I guess is tricky and other people shy away from. But for these guys, this image was one of their recent bits of work that we wanted to then use as the hero image on their website. And the first thing that kind of struck us with it was that, well, if it's going to be the backdrop of a website, we want it to be not too kind of bold and standing out too much and detracting from their brand, but also they'd given us a brief of another website that they liked and they wanted us to achieve a look. So the first thing we did was bring the image into Camera Raw filter. So the look, by the way, was almost like a kind of concrete wash over the image. So I'll have given you a file called West End Glebe. If you right click on that and hit open with Photoshop, it'll open in Photoshop. You probably won't get this Camera Raw filter popping up straight away just because you won't have set it up to do that. But that's the first thing we're going to do. So click open, come up into Photoshop and then go to preferences, and then we're going to come down to Camera Raw. We're then going to click on file handling and make sure that in this box, that next to JPEG HERC, it's set to automatically open all supported JPEGs and HERCs. Why is that? That's just because HERCs is the default format from a lot of iPhone cameras, and JPEGs are the default format for most images, full stop. We always want to automatically open those in Camera Raw because it just helps kind of speed up the process. It's, again, a little thing, but it makes a huge difference. We hit OK. For the time being, we're going to close that and we'll hit don't save. And ignore this. This is the end. But if we come back to then the original image and hit West End Glebe, we'll then hit open with Photoshop, and it should open up the Camera Raw preferences for us. If it doesn't, just follow along for now and I'll show you how to do that. But we're just going to use this as a quick run through of what Camera Raw is. Luckily this image was already touched up and it was already looking good, so we didn't have to adjust too many things in it. But in here, if you come into basic, this is probably the part you'll use pretty much all the time. It's where you can adjust the exposure. Now think about exposure as like how bright the image is, how exposed it is to light. Contrast is what's the difference between the whitest point and the blackest point in the image. Highlights is the brightest parts of the image. Shadows are the darkest parts of the image. So for example, you might want to brighten the highlights or you might want to darken the highlights. More often than not, you're probably going to be darkening the highlights and brightening the shadows. Great thing about that, as you can see, is it starts to bring in, over here, you can start to see a bit more of the, the color, rather than losing it, see, in the darkness. So you kind of brighten that a little bit, you get a bit more of the information, which is cool. And then when it comes to the white most point, we're going to want to keep that still pretty white. So we're kind of going to reverse the effect that we've done to the highlights here. And then same for the blacks. We want the black most point to still be black. And if I turn that off, you can see that it just helps it pop a little bit more. That's taking the highlights down by about 2 stops, shadows up by about 2 stops, and then kind of mirroring that in the whites and blacks is one of the quickest ways you can make an image look a lot better. This image already looked good, so didn't do too much, but yeah, it pretty much helps correct if an image isn't lit properly. Other things you might use a little bit is texture and clarity. You'll use that in particular if you're editing any food photography, just because it helps kind of, really bring out the texture and like the grains almost in food. Dehaze you might use a little bit if it's shot outside, or it's kind of weird lighting going on, but you won't use that too much. Vibrance and saturation are pretty self-explanatory. It's how vibrant do you want the image to be, or how saturated with color do you want it to be. You might adjust those a little bit, but I kind of prefer to adjust them manually later on in Color Mixer. We've skipped curve and detail because you're not really going to need to use those. So yeah, instead of adjusting the saturation in basic, you're better off coming in here and adjusting them via each kind of color. Now, as we said before, like we didn't want it to be too blue, so perhaps we can kind of bring it down to about 48 or so, 50 odd, which is cool. That's already started to kill the blue. It's not too overpowering now. That's great. Luminance is then, think of that as then, do you want that color to be a shadow, or do you want that color to be a highlight? Is effectively the way I think about it. Hue is then remapping different parts of different colors to another color. So you can see there, that's remapping the blues. Color grading you use quite a bit. That's then, say, mapping different parts of the shadows to a certain color. Equally with the highlights as well. For this image, we're going to want to map them to blue. So kind of what we were looking for is to make this black kind of aluminium or metal. It's probably steel actually. Mapping that to blue. So if we kind of bring it down on like a 45 degree or so to halfway in the blue. Yeah, it's not then overpowering. It doesn't look fake. It then kind of makes it look blue, right? So that's the difference that makes. If you come down here and you're blending, that's then, think of it almost like as opacity. If you have it as 0, it not be blending too much into the image. If you have it at 100, it'll be blending heaps. I normally leave it at about 50 because it's kind of just a good point. It's also the default, which is good. Balance you kind of use a little bit, but not too much, to be honest. Optics and geometry you will effectively never use. Effects, you use grain and kind of vignetting a little bit. Something like that perhaps for some of these kind of images. Grain is then kind of making it look like it was shot on film. But yeah, we're not going to really use those for now. And calibration we'll never use. So after doing all of that, we can come over here to these 3 dots and hit reset to default to bring back the original image. If we hit Command Z, we'll then get the filters back that we've added. And yeah, one thing we can probably do, we might actually take off these curve ones because we don't need those. If you've left those on, just make everything 0. But yeah, we can then come over into these 3 dots and hit create preset, which is also Shift Command P. But yeah, we can create a preset, call it Glebe, for example. I already have one saved as Glebe when I actually did this. So for now, I'm just gonna call it Blue Glebe. Call yours whatever you want. Just make it something that's relevant, I guess, so that you remember what it's for. Hit OK. Great thing now is if we then reset that to default, we can come over here to this Venn diagram overlapping circle looking thing and add Blue Glebe. or glebe or AUGRC test, which was one I did when I filmed this previously. Yeah, for now I'm just going to hit blue glebe because that's the one that we've just made, and we can hit open. Now, here's where we run into an issue, because we've done this straight away after opening up just the image by itself, and it's not been added into, say, an existing Photoshop file. The great thing about those preferences that we changed is that when you're adding an image into an existing Photoshop file, you'll then be able to edit it straight away. However, before doing that, you always need to make sure that an image is converted for smart filters. So what we're going to do is click that unlock button, because see, if we hit Shift Command A to get back into Camera Raw filters, we've lost it, which sucks. So what we're going to do is hit close, don't save, and then we're going to come back to the original image file and open it up again. We're also going to come in here and hit reset to defaults. Don't worry, because we've saved the presets. It's going to be super easy to get it back to the way we want it to look. We can then hit the unlock button, come up to filter and hit convert for smart filters, and we want to click OK. The great thing about this is this little box inside the thumbnail. If you double click on that, that then preserves the original image for us, which is fantastic. And then because we've converted it for smart filters, that's all. That little thing down here is called a smart object. We've then turned the image into a smart object, which is useful for heaps of things later on. But for now, what's important is it means that we can then add filters onto like smart filter layers, I guess is the way to kind of explain it. So if we then hit Shift Command A to bring up Camera Raw again, we can then hit this button here, which is Shift P for presets, and then apply blue glebe again. Hit OK, and amazing, it's been added on a smart filter layer, which is great because then it's preserved the actual image. However, yeah, actually that's probably good for now. That was what we were trying to achieve. So yeah, that'll do. Yeah, cool. So the great thing about that was we, I guess, set out with an end in sight. Now this is only kind of like part 1 of 3, to be honest, of the things that we're going to do. But great thing about it is that it, yeah, we set out with an end in sight and we kind of achieved it, right? And we made the image look better or good for what we needed it to. Cool. Gonna end that there, and I'll see you in the next video.